thanks for joining us here. So what we're going to be talking about, like I said, is what it takes to sell this kind of business. What does it look like? Are you actually ready to sell this kind of business? And when you are ready, how does the process work? And, I'm sure there's some standard questions that you all want to know: how much money you're going to make and how long is it going to take? But there's a lot of other things that obviously go into figuring out if this is right for you, when it's right for you, and what it's going to look like when it is. And so we obviously know very much about this kind of business. We've helped a lot of people start this kind of business. We've built these kind of businesses ourselves. And we've ended up partnering with the two guys that you're going to hear from today. They're actually both going to be talking, so they're kind of sharing the screen. And they're going to walk you through how this whole thing works. And so we ended up partnering with them so that we can help you all when you're ready to sell this kind of business. Because as you've heard me talk about a bit, is that you kind of have a couple options when it comes to making money from this kind of business. It's like, one is you can kind of run it for cash flow. You can sit there and you can make a good profit. I mean, we have members that do anywhere from 50 to 100 to more $1,000 a month in profit. That they, some of them reinvest a lot of that back in their business. Some of them actually take it out and they make good money from it. So that's kind of one way to build and grow this business and make money from it. The other way is to end up selling it. So we have members that have sold this kind of business for millions of dollars. And so there's another amazing sort of option you should be considering. And I'm sure that's why you all are here. And so we'll get into a lot of that kind of stuff a little bit later. I don't want to steal these guys' thunder, but you absolutely want to pay close attention. And we are going to do everything we can to have a replay of this. And so we'll give you the replay link at the end of the webinar. We'll also send it out via email, and we'll post it in all the communities and everything, so you'll have it there. So there is hopefully going to be a replay. I don't see any reason why there wouldn't be. I'm recording. Mr. Michael Lemons, who's running the tech side of this webinar, he's also recording. So we should have a good, clean recording so you can watch the video whenever you want. Because I'm sure this is the kind of thing you may want to watch again in a month or 2 months or 6 months, whenever you get closer to getting all your ducks in the row to actually sell your business. And so what's going to happen now is I'm actually going to, in just a few minutes, just turn it over to Ron and Jason, and they're going to walk through their whole presentation. And what I want you to do is just ask any questions you have in the Q&A box, this one that you all are already using very well. And so ask any questions you have in there. They cannot see this, only I can see this. And so what I'm going to do is, as soon as they get done doing the presentations, because I don't want to mess up their flow, is I'm going to jump back on, and then I'm going to start pulling questions from there. So if you have questions on stuff that they don't cover, or questions about stuff that they do cover, ask them there, and we'll do a live Q&A at the end of the webinar. So that's what we're going to do. And as usual, to clear up bandwidth on your computer, make sure your Skype and Facebook and all that other sort of stuff is turned off. I did actually receive a really cool comment before I turn it over to Ron and Jason, is that Greg here actually says that he just sold his business last month, this kind of business, with these guys, and apparently he had a really good experience. So that's always good, completely unprompted, but he just mentioned that in the Q&A. So that's really cool, and I guess Greg is here to learn more. Maybe he's jumping back in and building another one of these businesses, which we've had people do also. After they sell one, they're often building their next one. So it's a really cool thing. It's a really cool opportunity right now for everyone doing this kind of business. So that's really it for me. I'm going to mute myself, and I would like to welcome Ron and Jason.
All right, thanks a lot, Matt. Really appreciate it. This is Jason Garatas talking at the moment. My business partner, Ron Matheson, is on as well. I thought what we'd do here at the beginning is just tell you a little bit about who we are and how we operate, and then we'll run through the slides. That's generally the process we use with most people that come to us that want to sell their business, because one of the most important things to understand when you're going to sell your business is who you're selling it with. You want to make sure they know the business from the inside out, and that they can walk the walk as it relates to the lending process, the buying process, and even post-closing. So again, this is Jason Garatas speaking. I'm a former corporate lawyer. I was in the mergers and acquisitions world for about 13 years. I left that world to start my own e-commerce company called United Commerce Group. You can see my company's at unitedcommercegroup.com. I started that up about 5 years ago. Some of that includes Amazon companies. Some of that also includes website operations, where we actually run websites and Amazon companies for other people. So from that side of it, I have a pretty good insight into a lot of the things you guys are doing, from building brands to building your company to looking to scale and how you scale and on different marketplaces and platforms. Besides that, of course, we have Website Closers, which is our SMB platform, and we also own a company called Valley Bigs, which is a middle market mergers and acquisitions company that tends to focus on companies in the roughly $10 million to $500 million range. That's the upper level. We only focus on digital companies. We do not do brick and mortar. If a brick and mortar business comes to us or any of our brokers, we do hand that off to people that specialize in that. Our specialty is 100% digital companies. We have sold many digital companies, a lot of Amazon companies. We have quite a few brokers right now, and we have followers all over the world. People that, when we list a business for sale, we'll get hundreds of responses immediately for people that are interested in it, and they want to start talking, immediately on that. So finding a buyer for us is never a difficult prospect at Website Closers. At that, Ron, I thought I'd hand it over to you right now, and then we'll get into the slides.
Perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ron Matheson. Just a little bit of a brief background about myself. I actually come from the world of bricks and mortar retail. I formed a chain of stores called Off the Wall, and I had later a lot of stores called Thomas Kincaid Art Galleries. I built that to 22 stores in 7 states, got out of it in the early 2000s, got bored of playing golf after a few years and decided I needed to go back to doing something I was good at. I made an offer on a business. It failed due diligence. I did it 3 more times. They all failed due diligence, and I decided that I should become a broker if I'm going to, buy a business. So I went ahead and became a broker. I did purchase a couple of businesses, but I enjoyed the brokering side. So I stayed with it. For several years, from 2006 to 2010, I mainly sold bricks and mortar, probably in the vicinity of about 80 companies. Around 2010, I started going towards the digital space. And at that point, there was no turning back. At this point, I don't care how good a business it is in the bricks and mortar. I would not be interested in representing it. Everything we do is in the internet sector. And we, about that time I met Jason, we started comparing our talents, and they are unique and individual. And so, mine is more on the brokering side. I do understand the due diligence, the deal making, the financing elements, a lot of things it takes to get the company to the finish line. And as an example, most of the deals that we work on, at some point, they do break. And it's up to us to fix them if we're going to get them to the finish line, and our success rate is off the charts. So, once we formed our company with our unique talents, Jason's, particularly in the internet sector, as, one of the more knowledgeable people that I know. When we represent a company, we get it. We understand what you're doing, pretty much everything from A to Z. And so our company has expanded extremely quickly. And at this point, we represent well over 100 clients, and we're growing fast. So that's a little bit about my background and what brings us to this point here.
All right, thanks, Ron. I'll go right into the next slide. Why sell an Amazon business? Seems kind of like a common sense answer, but believe it or not, there's a lot of people that come to us wondering whether or not their Amazon company actually has any value. Because they don't understand what they're selling. Because people have read the terms and conditions, they understand that Amazon has terms and conditions that say that you can't sell the account, etc. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that and make sure people understood that it's not actually the account itself that you would be selling. As in any merger and acquisition, you are selling that which causes cash flow, which is generally the inventory that you purchase in e-commerce. In order to generate that cash flow. You're also selling other items, including intellectual property. You're selling the ratings and reviews, both at the ASIN level as well as the account level. You're selling the history in search for whatever happens with your Amazon listings. So there's a lot of things that are intrinsic in these acquisitions that aren't the account itself. And so we wanted to clear that up. And so whatever cash flow you're able to generate in your company, that's what is basically used to value your business. And of course, as we'll talk here, there's a number of value propositions along the way that helps us decide where to put that actual value on your company, but it starts with cash flow. Strategies to selling an Amazon business, there are many, but it's hard to say Amazon business by itself, because so many companies that we represent aren't just Amazon FBA businesses. They're also going to have an e-commerce element. They may have started out as, on their own website in e-commerce and then gone over to Amazon. We have many clients who, between 40 and 60% of their mix comes from their own website versus Amazon. So there's all different kinds of companies, some that are selling on Jet and Walmart, some that also sell on Vendor Central, and many of you probably are along the way in some of those sectors. So the strategies to selling really comes from us within the brokerage. Once we have a conversation with you, we look over your books and records. We truly dig into your financials. We understand the intellectual property associated with your company. Once we do all of those things, then we start working with you on an exit plan. And we have some people that we start talking to a couple of years in advance on strategizing to make sure that the company is put into the very best possible light. And we're happy to do that. We are a success-based firm, so we don't get paid our commission until, the business actually closes. But we do have a lot of clients we work with for a couple of years, before we get there. We've got several people that aren't going to go to market right now until 2018. And we're working with them now to make sure everything's right. And that includes everything from making sure the tax returns are filed properly, to, making sure that the SG&A is aligned to get the very best value out of the company and show growth throughout all those years. What is actually sold and transferred in the transaction? I touched on that just a little bit. Again, it's not the quote-unquote Amazon account. Amazon owns those accounts. Those can't be sold, but it is obviously the rights to sell on that account. We'll talk a little bit about this later, but there's asset sales and there's stock sales. For Amazon companies that are only Amazon companies that don't have any other sales channel, we tend to push people towards the stock side of the house. That also is better from a tax standpoint usually. And the reason we do that is because, you don't have to change an EIN in the back end in the Seller Central dashboard. Everything stays the same. You're just changing passwords, maybe changing bank accounts if they're not transferred. And the overall process is a lot easier on the stock side than asset. But I will say we have sold a large number of Amazon accounts as asset deals also. So both occur. Ron, I'm going to go to the next slide here.
Okay, great. When to sell an Amazon business. Now, this is a dilemma every business owner faces because, you're growing. You've got this company that, came from your sweat and blood. You love it. And the question is, what is the future? And nobody ever really knows that. A lot of people, the thoughts that go through their mind is, should I lock in, wealth for something that I've just created? Now, first of all, let's talk about how old your company is. The older, the better. The more tenure, the more attractive you will be in front of your suitors. Now, it doesn't mean that we can't sell a company that's early stage. As a matter of fact, we had somebody come to us that was 6 months old, basically said, hey, I'd like to sell my company. I want a figure that in the 7-figure range. And, he'd only really been profitable for a couple months. And I mean, profitable enough to attract, that type of buyer. And so I said, you're probably a little premature, but I love your company and what you do. And he called me a month later. He had grown even more from that point. And now I'm starting to look at it saying, he's doing some serious volume. And so we started talking. It took another maybe couple months before we actually launched. We closed, I think, right around the 1-year mark, a little before, a little after, but right around the 1-year mark. So, and we did close for a number that was in the 7-figure range, and it was actually a little higher than the number that he quoted to me when he first came to me. Now, that was a bank deal. So it's kind of a feather in our cap because banks are the most conservative of all creatures. And believe me, they don't like to lend money unless every box is checked and they feel 1,000% confident in the company. We do have a lot of sway with the banks. So, we're doing tens of millions of dollars a year with each bank that we have. And we usually work with about 3 to 4 banks at a time. And of course, not every deal we do goes through banks, but quite a few do. And we'll explain that as we get, a little bit further in. But, once again, the longer, the better. But, it's something you have to decide as to, what point to sell. Now, if you don't have on the next one $50,000 in annualized earnings, it's probably not for us because we prefer enough cash flow to entice the buyer, get them excited and want them to pull the trigger as the numbers get lower. You may go under contract. It's harder to close those deals. We tend to shy away from that. So we'd like to see at least $50,000 in cash flow. Cash flow, of course, isn't just what your profit is on the bottom line of your tax return. It's with add back salaries, the rest of it. Now, are you growing year after year and month over month? It's critical. If we do our jobs right today in this webinar, we're going to hammer you over and over and over with this. It's critical you sell your company on the way up. If you flatten out, it is going to reflect in your multiple. If you're going down, it'll really reflect in your multiple, and you may at that point not even be sellable. So, once again, in this particular conversation we're going to have today, we're going to hammer over and over and over. Sell when there's excitement. When your company is on the way up, every buyer is excited. Every buyer is willing to pay more. It just makes everybody's job easier and your return better. So, I know it's hard to, gauge when that growth is going to stop. Someday it is going to stop, but really important. Sell on your way up. Jason?
All right, now we're getting to the point where I'm sure all of you are really, really interested, and that is valuation. Some of the things we're going to say in here are quote-unquote standard. You're going to hear, standard valuation multiple of 3 to 5 times earnings. We're going to explain that. But it's really important that you understand that every single company is different. Of the hundreds of companies that we've all bought and sold and been involved in those transactions, I can't remember one that's exactly the same as another one. They are all different. They all have their own value propositions. The leaders of those companies are all different. Some are more creative than others. Some are more, financially minded. There's so many things that go into a business that you can't just say your company is worth 3 to 5 times earnings. But for purposes of this conversation and making you understand sort of the standard that where to start from, we do start from a 3 to 5 times earnings. And what that means is that we look at your seller's discretionary earnings at this level. If some of you out there have more than $2 million in EBITDA, then you're in a different level. You're more at the mid-market level, and we do start looking at EBITDA then instead of seller's discretionary earnings. But if you have less than $2 million, and that's not a guaranteed break, but that's sort of where it starts and where it ends. Less than $2 million in EBITDA, then we use seller's discretionary earnings, and that is your net income line. And then we add back anything in there that is discretionary, that you put in there that should be an expense. As an example, automobile expense. Well, obviously, a new owner wouldn't have to have an automobile on their P&L, so that comes off as an add back. Travel, meals and entertainment. Sometimes there'll be additional office expenses. We've seen people mow their yards at home and then put that in as an office expense. So we've seen all kinds of crazy things go into a P&L. And the obvious reason why that happens is because people want to pay as few amount of taxes as possible. We understand that. The banks understand that. Everybody involved, including the buyers, understands that. So we have to come up with what is the true discretionary earnings. So once we do that, then the result that we get, we then multiply between 3 and 5 times for a quote-unquote standard company. The next note here is that it's based off of the trailing 12 months. For most non-growth or low-growth companies, it is true that we would use the trailing 12-month P&L to determine what your seller's discretionary earnings are. Now, most companies that come to us are not non-growth or low-growth. We get some. But most of the companies that come to us are high growth, and so we try to move away from trailing 12 if we can, because when you're growing at a very high pace, it's not fair that you be valued on something that happened 12 months ago. Even if it happens to be, from a seasonality standpoint, better for you, it will be even better for you if we look at things and extrapolate forward in a pro forma. And so if you're very high growth, and we tend to say anything over 20% year over year is a rather high growth or very high growth company, then we can start looking at things other than trailing 12 months. Why is that important? Well, if we say 3 to 5 times trailing 12 is the standard, then what happens if we, instead of using trailing 12, we then use a pro forma for the entire year? Well, that changes everything, because your actual multiple then might still be within 3 to 5, but it's on a different set of financials. It's on a forward-looking rather than on a trailing 12. So we go back to this point that growth companies that are trending up are usually achieve higher multiples. And like Ron said, we want to keep hammering that home. You always want to sell your company on the way up. And it's impossible for anyone to know when that uptrend might stop. But if you're ever in doubt and you are thinking about exiting at some point and you think that you might see some flatlining and you need someone else to come in with additional working capital, additional facilities to help grow your company, now is the time to talk to us, so that we can get you to market and find somebody that can take that company to the next level. And that tends to be, for most entrepreneurs, and probably for a lot of you on the phone today, that tends to be where people are in these stages. They'll build their company for usually between 2 to 3 years, and then they get tired of it. They're ready to do the next thing, because most people that start these companies are creative minded, and that side of the brain gets bored pretty quickly if they're not still being creative. And so then they're going to sell this company to someone that tends to be more financially minded, and they tend to take this company to another level, and then the entrepreneur goes back and does it all over again. So again, growth companies are very important. Other value propositions and business factors can positively impact sales price. There are literally hundreds of different things that we can look at in a company from a value proposition standpoint to make it more attractive to buyers. Everything from whether or not it has subscription revenue, like as an example, the Subscribe and Save program at Amazon. Does it have a bestseller? Is it a company that's growing? Is it international in scope? Are you selling internationally on Amazon through all the different FBA opportunities? Is it about to go into wholesale? Is it on Jet and or Walmart at the moment? Is it selling on eBay? So there's a bunch of things that can be looked at. Also, what is the mix of sales per ASIN? Is there one particular ASIN that you sell that represents 90% of your sales? Well, that could be looked negatively upon. And so, that's the time when we start strategizing and thinking about how we can start manipulating things so that down the road when it's time to sell, that mix doesn't look like that. Calculating earnings in the sale of a small business. We talked a little bit about that. Again, at this level, earnings tend to be seller's discretionary earnings. I think we went over that, so I'll just jump into the next one, sample deals. Matt had asked us to do this, so I picked 3 that we did here recently. I think we've had 20 this month, but I picked 3 that I thought were pretty good. One was a pretty interesting company. It was a company out of Australia. In the compression sector, compression socks, pants, clothing, apparel. It was a branded product line. It was growing very well. It had roughly between 1 and 1.2 million in earnings, doing very well. But of course, anytime that you have a foreign seller, that can be a concern for a buyer and potentially a concern for a bank, because one of the things we're going to talk about today is the FBA, or the Small Business Association. They have a program called 7A, a 7A loan, where you can, over a 10-year period, buy a company and pay for it for over 10 years. Well, the thing is that you have to be a U.S.-based buyer and a U.S.-based entity in order for that to work. So this Australian individual had built this company and had the intelligence enough to actually start up a Wyoming business entity, and run all the revenue through that entity. That flowed through back to Australia, and he still paid taxes as usual. But now all the revenue was running through that entity, and he was, able to, if we needed it, also use the SBA, which broadens his buyer pool and makes the overall deal a lot more exciting, because now everything is visible in the U.S. Tax returns are filed. It becomes a lot more interesting than it's just a foreign seller. We have plenty of foreign sellers also that sell on the Amazon platform that come to us, and we can sell those just as easily. But it's important to note that when you do have a U.S. entity, it does become available for the Small Business Association. Just talking about this sample deal, in that deal, we listed it for sale, and within 24 hours, we had an LOI. This was from an individual that we had been working with on a prior deal that did not get that prior deal, and so was very hungry to get something new. The only reason that particular buyer didn't close that deal was because he had 10 people on his board, and they all would have had to have signed personal guarantees under the SBA process, and so they passed. And so within a week, we found a new buyer. He was actually a cash buyer, which is relatively a unicorn in our world. But he was a cash buyer for that business. I think he paid maybe 80 to 85% down on that deal. The rest of it was structured as some promissory note and some earnout. If any of you out there don't know what an earnout is, it's a really good financial tool that's used by us and by many others to ensure that you continue to get your just due for the company that you built in the future. Because as an example, if you're growing at a 40 to 50% clip, and we're valuing the business based off of that, well, the buyer's going to say, well, I don't know that it's going to hit those numbers, and the seller says, of course it's going to hit those numbers. And so the way that you sort of bridge the gap there is with an earnout, which is a performance-based tool. So if those numbers are hit in the future, then earnout monies are paid out by the buyer. And so in that particular deal, there were some earnout numbers as well, because we did base that particular deal off of some future growth. Another company that we sold pretty recently was in the skincare sector, 100% Amazon. Also had a Shopify storefront, but only represented a couple of percentage points of sales. That company was purchased. It only took about 2 weeks to go under LOI for that one. It was a consumer product line, branded product line. It was purchased by a company out of Manhattan that runs a portfolio of e-commerce companies that they have about 200 million in sales. Very successful company. In that particular deal, the seller actually is still working with that Manhattan company. Went out there for about a month and a half to transition the business, and then went back to Florida to live and to continue working with them, and has the intention to continue working with them for a while. Just so some of you know, that is a pretty important element to when you sell your company. You are the brains behind it. You're the creativity. You're the one that makes it click. So a lot of these guys, especially bigger companies, private equity groups, family offices, they're going to come to you and say, hey, we'd like you to stay on for a while. And they'll either ask you, to take an equity piece, keep an equity piece in the business, or, run a consulting agreement with you. And they want to actually use you, not necessarily in the CEO range, but more in terms of product development, project management, doing things that you actually enjoy doing. And these guys understand that you don't want to get burned out, so they'll pretty much ask you, what do you want to do to stay on, and they'll let you do that. So that is a part of that process, and that seller for that particular company is doing that now. And the third company we actually sold to the same company out of Manhattan was a supplements company, vitamins and supplements company. We have sold a very large number of supplements companies. We have a bunch of them right now that are under contract and about to sell too. In fact, we have one for about $15 million that should close in about 3 weeks. And we just sold another one last week for $9 million. That particular one that we sold for $9 million did go to the Manhattan company. That seller is actually going to move to New York. Excuse me. Move to New York and live in New York and continue to work with them. Excuse me. And continue to work with them throughout the process. So they wanted him on board, and they said that they're not going to buy this company unless he can come on. So he's agreed to work with them not only on that product line, that brand that he built, but also on future product lines that they're going to be working on as well. So that is a big part of this process, where these guys, they want the intelligence behind and the creativity behind these businesses. They want the brands, but they want the brains too. And so a lot of you are going to be asked when you do decide to exit your business, whether or not you want to stay on. Sorry, we're running a little bit low on time here, so I'm going to keep clipping along here. We talked about the earnings calculations. I already touched on this before. Again, at the S&B level, less than $10 million in revenue, you really are talking seller's discretionary earnings. Again, we talked about that's net income plus add backs. And just for purposes, and so for the future, it's here in the slides what it is that we add back. And at the middle market, we do look at things in a different way. We still look at growth, obviously, but we do kind of look at EBIT a little bit more. But we also can achieve higher multiples for high growth middle market companies. And that can be all over the board. The multiple range there, I couldn't even give to you, because it really depends, because the middle market goes all the way to 500 million. So just just for purposes of these slides, just wanted you to know that there is a difference. Most people on the phone would fall into the seller's discretionary earnings standpoint. And just so you understand where we're coming at with the multiples, I wanted to put in here a really quick sample valuation calculation. Most of you already know this, but it's just here in case you need it. Again, if you had a company with $1 million in revenue, $250,000 in earnings, and let's say you were growing at 20% year over year, you sold a branded consumer product, and you're probably looking at somewhere between 750 and 1.25 million for that business. If it's growing more than 20%, then we're probably not going to be using that standard valuation range. We're probably going to be looking at pro forma, and then some of those numbers could change considerably, although there might be more of an earnout on some of the overage over the 1.25 as an example. The caveat that I put in here, as I've noted before, is that there's really no way to call any of your businesses standard. Each of your businesses are unique. They're different in so many ways, and so we can't really talk about what your valuation is going to be in particular until we talk to you particularly, until we look into your books and records, we understand your balance sheet, we understand how you truly work, and then once we understand all of that, then we're going to be in a position to tell you, here's what we recommend you go to market. And just a note on that, Ron and I and all the brokers that work for us, we teach everybody that, there's a value range, and we like to teach the value range to our clients, but it's up to the client to decide a couple of things. The first one is you decide where we go to market. If you want to go outside the bell curve and you want to go to market at 10 times, trust me, we have done that. It usually ends up falling back, into the normal range, but people sometimes when they're not in a hurry, they'll ask to do that, and we're happy to do it because we understand that's how you value the business and you want to give it a shot. So that's really important for purposes of people to understand that we're not making those decisions. You're making those decisions. We're going to guide you and tell you what we think is best, but you're the one that always makes those decisions. And the other thing is making the decision on what the structure is going to look like at the letter of intent and the final doc stage. When we bring you a letter of intent, you're going to decide if you like that structure or not, and we're going to help you negotiate to get a better structure if you don't like it. And there are 1,000 different ways to structure a deal. And we have a lot of experience structuring them, so we can help in a lot of ways. But you make 100% of those decisions. We don't put anything in our engagement agreements where you have to agree to a certain number or anything like that. It's all in your control at both the letter of intent stage, at the engagement stage. All of it is at your control. Ron, I kind of went on and on there. You're up for this one.
Okay, sounds great. Process of selling an Amazon business. Now, when we first start, we start from company analysis and identification. There is an art to writing a business memorandum. You'll see some of these companies come out there, they'll write 40, 50 pages. A lot of it is dense prose. It can be demographics. It can be economic statistics on a national basis. It's pretty meaningless in the bigger picture. What we do is very concise. It's very to the point. It's never more than 10 pages. And, the buyer side love what we put together because it's the meat on the bones. There's no fluff. They can get right to the point. But at the same time, we have a process. We don't give away everything that you do up front. We want them to take a look at the most important points of your company, but we don't go into deep financials or anything else until we get to that second stage in most cases. Now, obviously, every case is a little different. If we're dealing with buyers we've worked with before or very experienced ones, some will want more data out of the gate. We may supply it, but for the most part, we want them to say, I like this, what comes next? And we want to guide the process. So that's how it kind of starts. The second thing is the search of investors and the identification of such. That is pretty difficult, actually, because there's a lot of people out there, specifically on deals under, say, $1 million. A lot of them can be tire kickers. We don't want to march bodies in front of you. So in other words, we don't want to set up 10 calls and, it turns out 8 of them really were no good at all. They didn't know what to ask. They didn't know what they were doing. Just total waste of everyone's time. So we do work our way through a lot of people before we let them in front of you. And there's a lot of things that you will not know that go on behind the scenes that, we basically have to make sure that this is an efficient process for everyone. So We work really hard on doing that and finding the right buyers to put in front of you, knowing that they're on board with the numbers up front, that, we have a lot of synergy in what you're doing and what they're looking for. And that way, once again, we're not wasting time. The next point is the negotiation and letter of intent. Now, there's a lot of things that happen on this. You have the contract terms. It's going to come down to, training periods, non-competes. Understand in your business, you will have to sign a non-compete. There are very, very, very few buyers out there that would ever buy a company where they felt you were going to come back within, say, typically 5 years, but minimum 3 years on a non-compete and start, hammering them. So understand that is going to come. But there's a lot of other things too. It can be, are you on, how long does the training last? Is there a consulting agreement, post-close? Where do you fit in afterwards? And we'll consult you every step of the way on the various options, what the expectations are. We'll make sure that buyers aren't taking advantage of a scenario where they're keeping you on for too long of a period of time where you're not being compensated. And, there's a lot of finesse in that particular part. Now, the next part is structuring a deal. Okay, we have teams of independents behind us, and they're all extremely good at what they do. There's tax guidance, specifically on the bigger sales. I mean, you're talking about a lot of money that you're paying out in taxes. You may not have to pay all that. We have groups that none of them work for us. They're all independent. We don't get anything back for it, so it's not like we're getting a commission on every time we give an independent. We don't. We want these people to be the best at what they do. That we want them to help you if you need it. And so we've got, everywhere from banks, due diligence experts, tax guidance. One of the things that's really important is on the legal side. When it comes to setting things up, you're going to need an attorney that advises you. But at the same time, what we don't want is an attorney killing the deal, because an attorney would love to take weeks, drawing this thing out for as long as they can because they get paid like that. We prefer transaction attorneys if both sides are on board with this, which means they don't represent either party. They draw up the docs. They then go to each side. Each side then takes them to a personal attorney who bills them for, a few hours instead of, many, many, many hours and a huge, paycheck they get at the end of the tunnel on that. So we'll go into a lot more depth on that as we get closer to, a sale, but that's something that we do specialize in, and it does facilitate the process to help you in a lot of ways. The last part is the execution and closing. Now, the last couple of weeks of any deal, it's typically the documents have been drawn. You've got attorneys now representing each side. They're just basically, trimming a couple of points out of there that they don't like or adding a couple they do want. Sometimes things do tend to go wrong here. That is where we come in. Once again, these deals do break. When they do break, it's our job to fix them. Obviously, we're incentivized to close. If we don't get paid. We're very, very involved on anything that involves a hitch or a start or something. We have to come in and fix. So that's where we're really good. Jason?
Yeah. We are running a little bit short on time, so I'm going to jump through these next couple of slides quickly. The only reason we have this slide in here is just for you to kind of think about what your business looks like and what it's going to look like to a buyer when you sell it one day. Are you multi-channel or Amazon only? Obviously, somebody that sells off of Amazon as well and has a mix of sales on other marketplaces, including their own website, is going to look a little bit more attractive than someone that's just 100% Amazon. Obviously, we all know that Amazon makes a lot of rule changes all the time, including some of the really important ones that came out here in the last couple of weeks. So the more that you can diversify your company, especially if it's branded, the better off you're going to be. FBA, seller fulfilled or mixed, that only is really important if you are mixing your overall sales. Obviously, if you're selling on other marketplaces, including your own, you might not be able to use an FBA for everything. So having a 3PL or your own warehouse, again, having those logistics in place can help you look a little bit stronger than someone that just only sells on Amazon. Now, I don't want to make anyone think that only sells on Amazon we can't sell your company, because those are highly valued companies, and there's not ever going to be a problem selling an Amazon-only company. But If you want to look better than the rest of the crowd, these are some things you can think about where you can, make yourself stand out. International scope, another thing that, a lot of people like to see, some sales over in Canada, some sales in the EU, having the VAT already behind you, and you've got some inventory over in the UK as an example. Those are the kinds of things that, again, make you stand out a little bit. We can sell you as an international company then. Those are things that do look good and do help you stand out. Branded versus non-branded. There's no question that a branded consumer product company is going to look far better than a company that sells other brands. So if you are a company that only sells other brands, I would recommend that you create a brand and that you begin selling under that brand as well, in addition to the other products you're selling. We sell a lot of companies that are, they don't have their own brand. That's okay. But if you want to look better, from a margin standpoint, from just about every standpoint, selling under your own brand is critical and really important. We've already talked about selling the upswing. I think this is the third or fourth time we've talked about it, so hopefully you guys see that it is really, really important. Always try to sell an upswing, diversify, keep inventory high. The reason that isn't there is because, when you're in the middle of the process of selling, and maybe we're in the due diligence process or whatever, for some reason, some sellers believe that's time to start pulling back on inventory. We've had many sellers, very big companies, that will not get lazy, but just stop buying inventory, and their ASINs will, end up being suppressed because there's no inventory. And that becomes a problem because it ends up hitting sales at a time where you need to continue to look big and strong. So when you decide that it's time to sell, you want to obviously be stocked on inventory. You want to continue to stock as if you're never going to sell that company. In fact, everything you do with your company during the sales process, you want to make sure that you keep everything moving exactly like you were not going to have a sale. And then obviously maintain growth, the whole idea of selling the upswing. Increasing value, again, just going to run through these really quick. Expand internationally. It's a really easy thing to do with Amazon, as long as you have the capital to be able to increase your inventory and shoot it over to the UK or to Canada. We recommend it because it does make you look a little bit better, and the competition is a lot lower over there, so it's a smart move. Sell products directly on a branded website, also very important. Most of you do that already. Most people will have their own website as well. There's very few companies out there that don't have at least a website, either from a manufacturing standpoint or it's also e-commerce. So, but that is important. Develop brand ambassadors. A lot of companies are doing that right now. People that go out, talk about them a lot on social media, blog about them, try to get as many shares, et cetera, as they can. People talking about the brand all over the place to continue to grow it so that other very large brick and mortar companies start seeing that, and they too want to carry that brand on their shelves. And so you should be thinking big picture. Of brand ambassadors can help with that. Subscription revenue, also very important. It's very similar to how SaaS companies are valued. SaaS companies and e-commerce companies are very different in the way that they're valued because, with a SaaS company, you're looking at, annual recurring revenue or subscription-based revenue. It's a very strong valuation point. If your e-commerce sales have a subscription level to them, you stand out. You definitely look better. And so I highly recommend that if you have the type of product, you sell the type of product that can be included in subscription, that you go about getting that done. Create brands, obviously very important. We talked about that. Register trademarks. When you're selling a company, people, especially when it's an internet company, there's not a whole lot of what we call FF&E, or furniture, fixtures, and equipment. There's not a whole lot of equipment, just stuff. It's a lot of goodwill, intellectual property, and inventory. And so to the extent that that's one of the few things that you have to sell, let's make sure you get that trademark registered so that the company is protected when the buyer comes in. Protect product lines through contracts. A lot of companies will transact a lot of business over email, which is normal. I would say 90% of the companies that we have do that. But we do have some trepidation in buyers when they don't see an actual contract. They feel like, especially if it's a proprietary product that's being sold, how do you keep that supplier from going out and just selling the same product to other people? You could be potentially creating competition right there. So to the extent that you can create a contract, even if it's not that strong, even if it's a one-pager, that will be helpful in the process for a buyer. Sell at the beginning of the scale opportunity to excite suitors. Really important also. There's a lot of different ways to scale, and we always like to have that in our tool belt to be able to tell people, oh, by the way, this is what they're doing right now. The expectation on the growth chart is going to be X, Y, and Z. And really helps get people excited. If you're already growing and then you're in the middle of a scale, that's going to be even more exciting. And that's what this whole process is about, is getting people excited about your company. Not just the brand, not just the cash flow, not what you've done in the past, but even more important, and for them to make their ROI, is where it's going in the future. And to the extent that and that's our job as the brokers, is to make sure that these people are excited about your business and want to jump on it. Here you go again, sell your business while it's in growth mode. I think that's the 5th time, so I think you all get it. Expand the company into other marketplaces. Obviously, a lot of people are moving into Walmart and Jet right now, and of course they're combining, so to the extent that you can do that, Walmart has certainly turned things around in the last couple of years, and we all believe that they're going to be very strong here in the next couple of years from the e-commerce standpoint. And develop a wholesale side of the business, especially if you're branded. Consider going into Vendor Central. Obviously, you have to be careful with how you price products, but we've got a lot of people that are pretty strategic in how they go into Vendor Central and utilize that, as well as look at selling your products through distribution channels, through other e-commerce sellers that sell product lines similar to yours. There's a lot of things you can do on the wholesale side too, and you could really blow up your business if you get to the right places. All right, Ron, I think this one's yours.
Yep, lending and structures. Now, this one is something I would love to go over really in depth. I'll keep it to our time limit here. It's important. Most companies that are priced between maybe say 300,000 and 3-4 million tend to go through the banks. The reason the banks are so important is because look at it like this. According to the FBA program, you can find a buyer who will put down 10 to 15%. We need, depending on whether, if it's considered a startup, which is less than 3 years, we would need 30% into the deal. If it's longer than 3 years, it'll need 25%. So essentially the way it works is the seller will typically hold a note for approximately 10 to 15%. The buyer will come up with a similar amount, and the bank will loan the rest, meaning a seller will get 85 to 90% of his total value of the company at the closing table. So it's why we like these deals the most, because it increases the price. It's a 10-year amortization on the deal, which means that you've got a longer period to pay it back, low monthly payments, and it's attractive to a buyer. And for a seller, I mean, the bottom line is you're getting most of your money at the closing. Great scenario. Now, the SBA loans have a bad reputation. Okay, as you can see in the third box, many loans fail. Actually, most of them do. But with us, they don't, for 2 reasons. Number one, we're really good at this. We've been through, so many, I wouldn't say dozens, but certainly well over 100. So we've done a lot of them. Now, what happens is this. We're giving these banks a lot of business. They're pretty beholden to us because they make commissions on all the paper that they're writing. And so the more business we give them, the more money they're making individually, and they're excited about it. So they want our deals to go through. They try to push as hard as they can to get them through. Now, the reason that they fail is because there's a lot of things in the process that most people don't know are coming, and they get blindsided. We handle it all from our end. The seller interview, we prep the buyers on what to say. The presentation of how to put everything together. We know how to explain the ad backs. A lot of banks don't want to write ad backs. We're good about how we package it when we're presenting all our paperwork to them. Also consider that we help with the business plan. We help with a 2-year projection. We draw the resume out so that it'll tie directly into the business plan itself, which is really important. The rest of this I'll kind of move a little bit quicker over. Stock sale versus asset. I mean, for the most part, it's better off for a seller to have a stock sale, but it's higher risk for a buyer. Some buyers will not do them under any conditions at all. It also opens up a nexus problem for companies that are already in business. And so, most of them are stock, but not all. Average deal size, there really isn't an average. We'll do anything from 100,000 to maybe, it could go all the way to 9 figures on some companies with our sister company, Valley Big, so they can become pretty big. We're doing right now 15, 20 deals a month is I think what our norm is. Average time to close. I think that's kind of important because there's expectations involved. Now, it typically takes 2 to 3 months to close. Okay, I don't think it happens faster than maybe 4 to 6 weeks ever. So 2 to 3 months, you can expect. Some deals do take longer, the bigger ones particularly. You do get teams of lawyers that want to get paid, and they'll drag the process out a little bit. So that tends to happen. So going to the next slide here, we've got the partnership on between Amazing and Website Closers and what we offer. In a nutshell, we don't charge you. And believe me, I had somebody call me just about 2 weeks ago saying, if you guys charge me up front, I'm not paying anything. And I said, well, it sounds like you had kind of a bad experience. And he said, well, I worked with this one company for a couple months. They charged me, this is hard to even fathom, but he said, they charged me $42,000 to write an analysis. And the number they came back with that they want to sell my company for isn't even close to what I would be willing to sell it for or wanted to. And so, we don't do that. It's real simple. You come to us, we may not take your company if we don't like it, but as long as we like it, we're not charging you. It's everything from, the prep work, buyer search, negotiations, due diligence assistance, fixing them when they break, everything from A to Z, we provide it. Okay. We package the deals with the banks. We have thousands of buyers from all over the world. And as long as we're reasonably priced, sooner or later, we're going to find a buyer for you. And usually it's sooner than later. We do have a very extensive group of people in the background, from lawyers, CPAs, it's the due diligence, the whole works, the bankers, everything that we can help with on this. And it really helps to facilitate it, because one thing I learned when I first started in this sector is that every deal that, we sent out for due diligence, they would go to their accountant. Their accountant doesn't know anything about what they're doing. And so they would basically say, they'd read the tax returns and say, oh, I found an anomaly here. And because of that, I think you're overpaying and it's higher risk than what you think. When I heard that for like the third straight time on my first 3 deals, I knew, it's basically called, CYA. So they're covering themselves, plain and simply. Going to the next page, we've got some Facebook questions. What level do you need to aspire to? Once again, we'd like to see you at, these are some questions actually that have come in, prior to this call that we're going to go ahead and field. But we prefer to see at least $50,000 in cash flow. What metrics? Typically, a buyer is going to look at the sales growth, the margins, the ad spend. There's various metrics that they're going to be looking at. We'll kind of coach you more in depth as we go. Does a 7-time multiple apply to Amazon businesses? It can. It's not typical, but we have to look at each company individually, and they're all different. Some of them are different sectors. Some of them, have a sex appeal to them. Other ones not so much. And we're going to coach you. We'll let you know. We've done this a lot, and we'll give you our best estimate on it. It can go to that level, but that would be the norm. If you have multiple brands under one corporate umbrella, how do they handle the valuation? That can be really tricky. We have a company right now under contract that is doing pretty good volume, and they're selling one particular ASIN or one particular brand, in their group. It makes it harder. It makes it harder to get bank loans. The tax returns aren't going to match. There's a lot of moving parts on them. It tends to get a little bit of a lower multiple. If you can help from splitting up your company, do so. You don't want to do that. Try to sell it all as one. But we can do it if that's your choice. When is the right time to sell? I don't think we went over this yet, Jason, but when it's going up. Real simple, when it's going up. So if we didn't hammer that enough times, when it's going up. Jason, I'll let you jump on the rest.
Yep, absolutely. The legal structure of the company, what legal structure of the company is needed, before selling a brand. We do hope that most people will either set up an LLC or a corporation to run their company through that. Believe it or not, we have had people come to us that operate under a social security number, and we can deal with that too. We can also help set up entities and give some advice on how those entities should be set up in order to sell. But as long as you run your company as an LLC or a corporation, either C or S, you'll be fine. And also the question was what special legal requirements are necessary before selling a brand. Not a lot. Again, for the brand itself, hopefully you've gotten a trademark on the brand. And of course, we'll do an assignment of trademark at closing. What is the transfer of assets process, and how does the payment and transfer process work? Everything is transferred in the either asset purchase agreement or in the stock purchase agreement, and those assets are delineated in the final docs. So everything will be outlined in that final doc. Usually the process starts with a letter of intent, and then we go into due diligence. And once due diligence is everyone's good with it, that's sort of when the lawyers start getting involved and getting the docs ready. We usually ask that people use a closing attorney, or also known as a transactional attorney, in the middle that represents the deal, and then each party have their own attorney. That way, the docs are actually created by a middleman instead of one of the particular parties. I'm sure all of you understand that if one of the sides has the docs drawn up, that's going to cause considerable cost to both sides because you're just going to get a bunch of red lines from the other attorney. Can the business and brand be sold without actually selling the Amazon account? It can. We are doing that right now to a couple different companies. It does make it a little bit more difficult because if you don't sell the Amazon account, that represents where most of the cash flow is probably coming from. And if they have to set up a new account, they're not going to have the history that your particular account has, and there's also velocity issues. We all know that at any given time, Amazon might slow things down for you if your velocity gets too high. They could either hold your money for 2, 3, 4, 5, I've seen 6 weeks, or they could actually suspend you for a while if they're concerned. And so, we do have a lot of buyers that come in and get concerned about that. So we have some structures and some strategies that we can help with that if that is a concern. We just need to talk through them and understand what your concerns are. How is unsold inventory taken into account? Inventory is what generates cash flow. So on there's a couple different ways to value a company. You either do it what we call a fire sale basis, where you just sell the inventory and the FF&E and you're done, or all the real way, which we sell companies on a cash flow basis, which means that all the parts of the company are needed to actually generate that cash flow. So the inventory goes into the deal, and there will need to be a certain level of inventory. It's called working capital. There will need to be a certain level of inventory in the business on closing day, in order for the buyer to be okay with being in a good position to take over on closing day. And the last question here was, looking to buy a business, can you explain that process too? I've purchased many companies myself, so from that perspective, I can tell you that when you're looking to buy a business, look for things that are in the branded spectrum. Right now, it's best to buy brands. As an example, Amazon's making some changes right now where potentially you might have to pay to play on the platform if you're selling other brands. So it's really important you look for that. You want to look for companies that are growing. We keep mentioning that, but that is a very important element of things you want to look for. And if you have any other questions about if you are looking to buy a business, give us a call. We'll be happy to talk to you. There's a lot of things to discuss as it relates to what you want to look for when buying a business. So with that, I know we're at 4 o'clock here on the East Coast anyway. Matt, do you want to open this up to some questions?
Yep, absolutely. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, so that was awesome. Thank you very much for all that. So we got a lot of good questions here. So one, I'll just, in no particular order, are you all familiar with, have you all had to deal with anything with Amazon brand registry?
Yes.
Was that able to be transferred?
Yes, they are able to be transferred. So the Amazon brand registry is, allows the person that actually set it up to be the one to control the ASINs. And so that's why it's important that the Seller Central account be sold, usually through a stock sale. That way the entity doesn't change. The only thing that changes are the stockholders. And so in that perspective, whoever, whatever account it was that set up the brand registry will continue to run that brand registry. We'll have protection for it.
Okay, I think we got the idea. It was cutting out just a little bit at the end, but I think we got the idea. And just so everyone knows, we haven't mentioned this yet, but like we said, we we have partnered with Ron and Jason and their company to basically bring this service to you all. And so if you're interested, you actually just threw the link up there on the slides. I'm also going to put it here in the chat. So it's just go.amazing.com/legacy. And also on that page, as soon as we get done with the webinar, we're going to edit the videos and we'll get a copy of the recording and a copy of the slides. I know a lot of people are asking me for the slides. We'll get a copy of the recording of the webinar and a copy of the slides up on that site. So go.amazing.com/legacy. And if you would like to talk with somebody, if you want to get the ball rolling to sell your business now, or you want to start the conversation now, and you know you may be 6 months or a year or 2 years out, then there's a form on there that you want to go ahead and fill out. So it's just go.amazing.com/legacy. And it's on the screen there. I also put it in the chat. So go ahead and go over there. That's where the replay will be. And also you can go ahead and click the little button there, fill that thing out, and we will connect you with someone to talk about selling your business. So got to get back to the questions here. So there's a lot of questions that there's like 5 or 6 people that I'm seeing. A lot of people want to know how do you all get paid on this deal? Like what is your commission and how does that work?
Sure. Ron, I'll be happy to take that real quick.
Sure.
It really depends on the deal. Obviously for really large companies, we work off of what's called a reverse layman, which is sort of the investment banking structure where there's a tiered approach to the commission. In such a scenario, the more money that we're able to get you at closing for your transaction, the better we are paid. Again, we do not take any expenses up front like a lot of companies do. Everything is set-based. Our commission runs from 6 to 10%, which is the standard in the industry. And again, we work out together. And again, like I mentioned before, you guys make the decision as to where we get paid and what that structure looks like as far as the layman goes. Some of the smaller deals, we do not use a layman. It's usually just a 10% deal. Again, that is standard in the industry. We never let commission get in front of a deal. So we'll certainly talk to you, but that is sort of the standard in the sector, and we all just sort of live by that. I will say that us compared to any other brokerages out there, you can just see by the prices on our website. You can see from the sales history on places like Biz Buy Sell. We outperform everyone in this sector from a sales purchase price standpoint. Which means that we earn our commission well over what would have been earned from any other brokerage. I hope that helps.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I can definitely vouch for that. My dad actually just went through the process of selling their business. They built over 15 plus years at the end of last year. And I know with the broker that they went with, they paid a good chunk of money up front and then also had to pay the sort of performance-based commission. And so if you can do it, which is, part of the reason why we wanted to partner with these guys is because it's very low risk on your part. It's like if these guys can't sell your business, then they don't get paid. So obviously like they're there to align their interests with yours, just to get your business sold for the largest amount possible. And that's how everyone wins. So it's a great arrangement. So we got a few questions here, actually multiple people. There's Mike, we got Nicole, and I feel like there's one other person who says they have a Canadian corporation. Is that okay? What does that look like? How is that different is kind of generally what they're asking.
Yeah, definitely. And we've sold a lot of Canadian companies. Not a problem at all. We have companies from all around the world that come to us to sell their companies, and they usually want to sell in the U.S. But we are an international firm, so we can sell to and from the United States or to any other country. If you have a Canadian corporation, there's a couple of different things we could be looking at. One, are we going to sell to a U.S. owner or U.S. buyer, other buyer? Are we going to set that company up potentially for an FBA opportunity? And if so, we might want to think about setting up an entity in the U.S. and running revenue through it. Like I was talking about with that one deal with the Australian seller, that's what he did. And that opened up the opportunity for us to use the FBA. And again, that's really, really important because if a person can come in and buy a company for only 10 to 15% down, the buyer pool is massive. I mean, think about $1 million deal as an example. If you only have to put $100,000 down, think of the numbers of people that have $100,000 versus someone that may have to put $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 into the deal if they don't have a loan. And so that's why your buyer pool is so big. So if you have a Canadian entity, we should talk about some strategies if we think that we need to from a perspective of lending. But I got to tell you, I mean, you really don't need the SBA process to sell your business, because there's just so many buyers out there right now, and so many that follow us and that are in our network, that if you're looking to sell your company and you're not U.S. based, it really doesn't matter. We'll get it sold.
Great. So I've already answered that question. Same kind of question. You can just, give the 30-second overview if it's any different, but same question for the UK. This person, Scott, says he has a UK limited business.
Yep. Yeah, we have a business closing on Friday that's a UK business for $15 million. That's being purchased by a wealthy individual who's paying cash. Of course, that individual would not have been able to use the SBA process, but he actually is using a lending facility, a revolving line of credit, for the working capital piece. And of course, that's being done based on his own collateral and his own abilities to service that debt. But that is a UK company that we had no problem selling. It went under contract very quickly. We had a lot of interest in it. In fact, we had 5 buyers going back and forth on various LOIs to try to get the business from him. And so, that is a good business. It didn't matter that it was in the UK, and it's 100% Amazon FBA. So, just like the Canadian business, it really doesn't matter if you're international. Nobody's really concerned about that, because, of course, the buyers are here in the U.S. The consumers that are buying the product are here in the U.S.
Okay, great. So Will asks, is it, from a valuation perspective, is it better or does it matter if it's if the person just sells using FBA, or I think you all are probably familiar with this, or if they're in the vendor program, which means it's shipped from and sold by Amazon, and actually Amazon's kind of buying from them wholesale. Does that affect anything?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it does have an impact. We like selling companies that are selling both ways, because we're able to then use the opportunity to say, hey, these guys are also just starting out in the wholesale sector by already selling to Amazon direct. And, through that, they're now able to do a lot of other things wholesale, because they've got those experiences, and they can start selling wholesale to other big box stores. And so we like it from that perspective. Again, you have to be really careful with how you price your products when you're selling both ways. And it will have an impact on your P&L on a month-to-month review as you change over from direct to consumer to selling directly to Amazon. So if you're thinking about doing that, you're in the process of doing that, give us a call. Let us go through it with you. But I think to answer the question, it is better, yes, to sell both.
Okay, great. So we got John Carlo, who's actually been at one of our higher end events. He says, kind of want some clarification, how exactly cash flow is calculated for this kind of business and how that affects valuation.
Definitely, yeah. Cash flow, it generally speaking, and this is in one of the slides, is also known as seller's discretionary earnings. They have a lot of different nomenclatures for all these things. Sometimes you hear cash flow, sometimes you hear net income, sometimes you hear EBITDA. All of them for the S&D world, all of them kind of go down to seller's discretionary earnings. And again, that is your net income at the bottom of your income statement on the last 12 months of the business. And you add back any, personal expenses, any one-time business expenses that, a buyer would never have, and the owner's salary. Although at times you may need to add back some monies if you need to hire an employee to replace one or more owners. So that's generally the way that we calculate earnings. And again, it's usually done on a trailing 12-month basis for purposes of valuation, unless you're a higher growth company. And then we usually put together a pro forma in those cases so that we are able to maximize the value of your business when we go to market.
Okay, so Kirk says, apparently because they're sort of related to FBA versus the vendor program, I guess he does a lot of FBM, so he's fulfilling the orders himself or uses a fulfillment company. Is that a big issue? Does that matter for people looking to buy?
Not at all. In fact, it probably represents a great opportunity, because if you're not currently FBA on a lot of your products, obviously once you do go FBA and you become Prime, it will be looked upon very favorably from a buying perspective as an opportunity, because then the algorithms are going to push you up. Everyone believes anyway that they're going to push you up in the search engine result pages because you're now Prime. So I see it as an opportunity, and I think a buyer would too.
Okay, cool. That's a good point. So Ryan asked, he just said it would be helpful if you gave a little bit of a bit more of an explanation on the difference between a stock sale and an asset sale.
Absolutely. Sorry, Ron, I'm kind of hogging here. Do you want me to
please.
go ahead?
Take care. It's great. This is great.
Okay. An asset sale is you're truly transferring the assets of the business. Assets are identified as goodwill, the furnitures, fixtures, and equipment, any intellectual property in the business, obviously the domain names. Those are truly the assets. Assets can be tangible and intangible, which you can touch some, you can't touch others, like a trademark as an example. In a stock deal, you're also getting the assets of the business, but you're getting the stock, which means that you're basically taking over that company, including potential liabilities associated with that company. So in a stock deal, buyers are always going to be leery of buying the stock of another company because they don't know what the owner's been doing. And when they buy that stock, yeah, they're going to have some representations and warranties in the stock deal, but they could be concerned that maybe they didn't pay their taxes in certain states. Sales tax might not have been paid. Maybe there were nexus issues in sales tax, and these guys made the decision not to. They didn't feel there was nexus, but then maybe a state comes back later and says, "Oh, by the way, there was nexus, and you now owe us $100,000." So those are the kinds of things that can be concerning for buyers from a stock perspective. But as we noted during the webinar, a stock transaction is better for an Amazon company because you don't have to change anything in the Amazon account. The EIN stays the same. The entity of record stays the same. In the eyes of Amazon, truly nothing changes because the entity is still there. And so, the ratings and reviews for that particular account don't change. Obviously, it has no impact on a product or an ASIN anyway. But it is an easier sell for an Amazon company through a stock transaction.
Okay. Yeah, I was just because I can chat responses to some people, and so I might as well just ask it out loud. Barney was asking basically, how old does your company have to be before you can sell it? I mentioned that you all had covered that earlier, and you said that longer is better, but you've sold companies that have been around for as little as 6 months to a year. I don't know if there's anything else you want to throw in there on top of that.
Yeah. Ron had mentioned earlier, and it's sort of a feather in our cap, that a company came to us that was blowing up this business. I mean, doing really, really well. And they came to us at the 6-month mark. And so luckily, they had filed taxes. Within that 6 months, they had filed taxes the prior year. So we were able to use the return to actually go to a bank and get a loan. So we got an SBA loan on a 6-month-old business. It was underwritten in month 7.5, maybe 8, and we got it closed in, I think, month 10. So we try to tell people to wait until you're a year old, but certainly if you're in a situation where you built the company, you feel like you're in a position right now where you want to sell it, you can come to us and we can certainly give it a try. And we've had successes with less than year-old companies, but our recommendation is to wait 1 year since inception, and let us take it from there.
Okay, so just a few more questions here, and then we will wrap up. So this one, you kind of covered it earlier, but I'm not sure if I got the full answer. It's basically, how does inventory work in the sales price? This person says the business has about $1 million in sales. I assume that's annual, and about $300,000 in inventory. There's no debt or anything, so it's $300,000, I guess, in purchased inventory. I assume that's cost value. I'm not really sure. So how does that factor into the valuation?
Well, it goes back to your balance sheet. We have to look at the balance sheet and understand what are the working capital, quote unquote, working capital needs to continue operating your company. And any buyer that comes in, the last thing they want is to buy the company and there's no inventory, right? So there's a certain level of, there's 3 elements of current assets, being cash, accounts receivable, and inventory. Those are the things that are the working capital of the company from month to month. There's a certain level in each of your companies on the balance sheet that shows what's necessary to run your company. So if $300,000 in inventory is necessary, then that's the necessary mark. Maybe it's higher, maybe it's lower. So what happens is during the negotiation stage, we come up with what is an acceptable working capital. And then if at closing the working capital number is calculated higher, then there's usually an offset either in a check at the closing table or maybe we increase a note. Those kinds of things. So that's all part of the process. It's in every single deal. There's always a working capital conversation that's involved. It's hard for us to answer whether or not that $300,000 would be an appropriate number, because we truly have to see your balance sheet, understand the company, and then at that point we can give you our opinion.
Okay, great. So we'll end on a interesting question for the last one. It's kind of funny, but kind of very true for entrepreneurs, especially in the early stages. This person asked, can you confirm what the ideal sales tax compliant is, as there are many interpretations? As I'm sure you all are probably familiar with Amazon stuff, it's a little confusing in terms of sales tax and all that. So like, how have you all seen that kind of shake out in the sales of these kind of businesses?
Yeah, it's a really good question and really poignant. There's no, first of all, I'm a lawyer, but I'm not a tax professional. I usually go to tax professionals when I need help. But I will tell you that it is something that a lot of people are concerned with, because obviously when you send inventory into FBA, it goes to multiple warehouses. Those warehouses are located in different states. I know there's companies out there that help manage this process. And so there are companies out there that just pay in every state where there's a warehouse, every state where there's an Amazon warehouse. There's others that will only pay in their nexus state, wherever they have their office or wherever their residency is. If they have multiple offices, they do it that way. We see it all across the board. I think in the next couple of years, we're going to see that, maybe get a little bit more hard and fast as to, what those nexus lines are. There's obviously some legislation before the government to make some serious changes as it relates to nexus in each state, and make internet sellers actually sell or pay sales tax in every single state. And they're trying to manage how that would look. So our legislatures are actually trying to change our lives. So to the extent that you can help that, talk to your legislatures and try to get that fixed, because it's going to affect all of us at some point in time. But I hope that helped. I know that wasn't an exact answer, but hopefully it was helpful.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we're kind of at the end of the time we have available, and I think we've covered most of the questions. So like I said before, just if you're interested in selling your business now or in the future, go ahead and head over to go.amazing.com/legacy. You can see it there on your screen. It's also in the chat. And there's some more information there, and you can fill out the form there, and we'll connect you with somebody that can talk about selling your business. And we're also going to be trying to get a webinar replay as quickly as we can out to you all. So we'll send that out via email, and we'll also post it on that page, go.amazing.com/legacy, along with a copy of these slides. So yeah, I just want to say thanks to Ron and Jason. This is awesome.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Matt. Really appreciate it.
Yeah,
thanks
everyone.
Cool. So yeah, so that's it for the webinar, everybody. Thanks for joining. I hope to hear a lot of you all and sort of get this amazing experience of building this business from scratch and selling it for a lot of money and really changing your life. I look forward to hearing those stories and seeing you all again in the future. So thanks for joining us on this webinar, and I will see you all soon.
Take care.